That was the coolest intro I could come up with. Hello everyone, welcome to my new closet. This closet doesn't really let you hide in it the same way that my old one did, so it's kind of like we've come out of the closet, yay! It's also quite echoey in here. I waited until we moved to record this one because I thought, oh well, I've moved all of the clothes out of my other closet, so now that'll be really echoey, but joke's on me, it's echoey anyway. So let's talk about foxes. I love foxes. Okay, look, it's not all that uncommon for somebody to get really attached to a specific animal. Whether it's because from the moment we're little kids, we wind up being asked, what's your favorite animal? Or if it's because we truly feel some sort of a bond to the personality that society gives them, it's really hard to say. Maybe you're just like, I like puppies because they're cute. The end. Now for me personally, that animal since I was probably like 11 has been the fox. And it's been grounded in lots of different things. It's been, you know, stories about foxes. It's been actual facts about foxes. It's been lore surrounding foxes. It's been the way that we depict foxes. So many different elements of it. So today's episode is called The Animal Connection and Why I Love Foxes. I'm Dodger, and on behalf of all of us, welcome to the Fox Fandom. Dodger, foxes aren't a fandom. Excuse you. Au contraire, sirs and madams, it turns out that foxes have various permutations across lots of different media and across even centuries of time. From the lore of ancient texts to the movies and TV shows that we watch today. But I get ahead of myself. Why did I first start to love foxes? Side note, this is going to be a very personal welcome to the fandom, so be prepared to hear like little Dodger stories as this goes on. So I grew up on a farm, and there was one day on the farm where my dad pointed out into the field and he goes, do you see? Can you see him? And tiny me was so excited. I was like, see what? I can't see anything. And then I realized there was a fox completely just frozen still right outside of the fields. And then in an instant, it was gone. And my dad goes, you know, that's really rare. We typically don't see foxes at all. They're normally more careful than that. And it suddenly occurred to me that I had never seen a fox's roadkill. Now I know that that sounds terrible and like kind of creepy and gross, but I lived in the middle of the country. You know, we had backwoods everywhere. There were lots of animals that unfortunately got hit by cars, and I never once saw a fox. And from there, it turned into like this crazy mystery for me. I started doing research. They were smart, they were able to stay hidden, they were beautiful animals. Looked up pictures of them, I read articles about them, and around this time I started to get really into manga, and Japanese lore has lots of uses for foxes and lots of permutations of like the fox lore and different incarnations. So that was starting to show up in things that I was reading, and I was like, whoa, there's some fox characters here. And then it started occurring to me, you know, like when you've just learned a word and suddenly you hear everyone using that word and you're like, how did I never notice this before? It was much like that where I was watching TV and realizing there are so many characters that are foxes. So up until the point that I was doing like media research, they were smart, beautiful animals, right? And then once I started to see them in manga, that added in this segment of like, okay, some cultures also see them as magical and kind of mystical in a way. And then more of the traditional media that I was ingesting as like cartoons and things started to put in this other level of they're kind of mischievous, they're swindlers, and they're also drop dead sexy, or foxy if you will. So at this point, Child Dukes is like, okay, so foxes, if foxes were people, they would be mysterious and sensual, and they would have this air of mischievous about them, and they would be not to be trusted, so they're kind of a beautiful trickster, which personality-wise is so unlike me. So let's tackle these characteristics for a fox. Where did these even come from? Why are these such widely known personality traits for a fox character? I mean, to start with, even as a kid, right, I had already on my own pulled out words like beautiful and smart and cunning, you know, like words like that. So it's really not a huge stretch that other cultures and other types of people would look at foxes and kind of pull those same adjectives out of thin air. But if we go beyond that and focus on specific cultures, in Japan, the fox, or the kitsune, is typically endowed with the ability to shapeshift. Oh my gosh, Dodger, you've always talked about how shapeshifting is like your favorite superpower. Is that why? You know, until I was doing a lot of research for this and like writing this whole thing up, I hadn't honestly thought about the fact that there was a possibility that had skewed my perception of shapeshifting, but look, it's either foxes or it's Mystique, and I don't know which. It happened as a child. Anyway, so the kitsune in Japanese lore typically gain more and more power the longer it lives, and also possibly more and more tails, which is where the lore of the Kyuubi comes from. But Kyuubi is very different from just like a standard spiritual fox. Kitsune are typically given that kind of trickster character, but also they're considered to be ringing spirits and to be messengers of the gods, specifically the god Inari. Now there's also the possibility that some of these stories actually came from China, Korea, or even India. There are lots of similarities in fox lore across all of those countries for whatever reason, like, more specifically, the Kyuubi, like we were talking about, Kyuubi no Kitsune, is a nine-tailed fox. It's a very well-known lore from Japan, but there's also in China the Hulijing, which is a nine-tailed fox. China also perpetuated the idea that foxes were symbols of seduction and told people that different elements of their body, different body parts, if you were to eat them, it would work as an aphrodisiac. What we do know for certain is that since 711 AD, one of the gods that's very well known in Japan is named Inari, and Inari is a god of foxes. Foxes, fertility, rice, tea, and sake. But you could, if you think about it, you could use adjectives like smooth or feminine to go with pretty much all of those things, and so we can also attribute those adjectives to foxes. And if you watch a lot of anime or read a lot of light novels or anything like that, you will notice that fox characters in general are always very feminine, very beautiful, very graceful characters. Even the men are very beautiful men, the women are very beautiful / seductive women. But enough about Japan, let's talk about Celtic lore. So they believed that foxes were a wise and noble guide. You would rarely see them in your normal day-to-day life, and then once you died, they would be the ones who would show up in the spirit world and guide you to your final resting place. For the Native Americans, it's a little bit tricky because there were so many tribes, but I mean, in Britain, there were so many tribes as well, Scottish tribes and Irish tribes and whatever. But anyway, so with the Native Americans, some of them believed that foxes were very wise, noble beings, and then the rest of them believed that they were sinister enough even to possibly kill you, to lead you to death. In Scandinavia, there are some tales of fox women who fall in love with human men, and the men fall madly in love with them, but then once their life starts together, they realize that the fox woman is so dangerous and wild that they literally can't be together. Another story that I actually really love that's kind of similar is from England, and it's called Mr. Fox, and it's about this man named Mr. Fox who proposes to women but always conceals the bones of his last wife within his hair. What? Okay, so let's wrap all of that up into a personality that we could say is the standard fox personality as perceived by most cultures. Most people see foxes as wise and cunning, which is also directly connected with mischievous and being sort of sinister and even as far as evil. Foxes are most commonly drawn and depicted with sort of the red sleek coat, so we highly associate that, and also their incredible hunting abilities. Just that quickness, that beautiful quickness. And so because of that, we give them kind of an element of intensity and passion that is also linked to desire. Now, the eat their testicles and you'll totally get laid thing is all China. I didn't see any other place that believed that, so we're gonna give that to China. China can have that. And here is my absolute favorite part, that foxes are so quick and good at getting out of situations and hiding that many cultures perceived that as disappearing by magical means, and so they were given this supernatural ability of shape-shifting. So many cultures believed that they could do this. Japan, China, India, the Native Americans, just so many. So from there you can kind of see how this personality was attained over time and why this animal winds up being so fascinating to me. But it goes beyond that because it's been my favorite animal for so long. It's become iconic to me for different elements of my life. So in my opening statement, I mentioned that we tend to feel a kinship for certain animals. There are animals that, for whatever reason, for some of us, we feel as though it's a representation or a materialization of our spirit, which sounds ridiculous. That sounds so silly, and I realize that. I think of it more as saying the characteristics that we as a society have endowed upon this animal are representational for me for a certain reason, whether it's of me now or of what I want. So say we were gonna focus on other canines, right? Like wolves. If someone were to say, yeah, I feel very connected to wolves, you kind of think of wolves as being strong and fearless and family-oriented and also kind of humorless. With domesticated house dogs, there's this feeling of loyalty and friendship and fun-loving and, you know, a carefree sort of element. But for foxes, why do I feel so connected with foxes when the social connotations of a fox is nothing like me? Okay, let's get real right now. I think that we tend to meta the animal game. Oh yeah, I'm like totally a wolf. Are you a wolf, or do you admire the qualities that we associate with wolves? Do you strive to be more like a wolf? If I was gonna be honest about foxes and why I love foxes, I would say that I admire how we paint them as being very free. As a kid, like a kid, I fought all the time. I fought with girls. I was part of a girl gang on the playground that like trapped boys. It was terrifying. We were terrifying kids. But at a certain point, that part of me kind of like fell away in the interest of being a good kid and not being too much trouble for my parents, etc., etc. I mean, from there, I was super careful. Anybody in my family, any of my old friends would tell you that I was like an extreme goody-goody. I never dated. I got like fairly average grades. I didn't get amazing grades, but I got average grades. I've never once snuck out, ever. And it's not that I wasn't happy. I was extremely happy, and I have a great relationship with my parents now, I think because I didn't terrorize them. But the older I got, the more I realized that I had put up kind of this psychological barrier. I started to have really weird social anxieties when I would hang out with more than 1 or 2 people at a time. I would get completely overwhelmed. And then like the idea of dating somebody or doing anything romantic at all with another person was like terrifying to me. And this was when I was in college, like in university. I had gone from this really wild, free-spirited little girl who used to climb trees all the time and get lost in the woods to this very overly cautious and overly apologetic adult. So what does this all have to do with foxes? I'm getting there, I promise. So what I was saying earlier about how foxes have been my favorite animal for so long that they've started to be iconic for something else, what I mean is that they're iconic of what I want out of myself. Are you ready to hear something totally embarrassing? I would go into situations and I would think, be the fox, be the fox, be the fox. In the same way that like you would throw somebody into a boxing ring and be like, be the tiger. It was like, be the fox, be the fox. Don't act like a super weirdo. You're totally fine with this party. Nothing's wrong. Because I knew that those qualities were inside of me somewhere. I had been that person before. I had been an extreme, and I don't want to be that extreme anymore, but I know that there's a balance that I can attain, that I can be that confident person. I would kind of stumble through and pretend that I was confident, and eventually it got easier to talk to people and make friends again. And eventually I started going on dates, and you know, that was nice. At this point, I would say that I've pretty successfully incorporated those fox qualities into my life because it's easier to talk to people, it's easier to stand up for myself, and dating is way more healthy than it's ever been in my life. And I'm not saying that I spent every day of my life being like, be the fox, be the fox, be the fox, be the fox, be the fox. I'm saying that there was a certain point where I looked at those fox attributes and I realized that I wished I was more like that. I wished that I felt more wise, and I wished that I felt more beautiful and more confident, and etc., etc., etc. And now I would say that a fox is more a symbol of the progress that I've made. As another example that's completely different, let's talk about Erin. Erin is one of my absolute best friends in the whole wide world, and she loves otters. Now, I'm not speaking for her, obviously, but coming from this standpoint of like what I've developed through this whole video, coming from that view, it makes perfect sense to me why she would love otters. Because in the face of having to be this strong, incredible, optimistic person while having something like bipolar disorder, I think that otters in a strange way represent a lot of joy and freedom and a carefreeness that she strives for every single day of her life. Again, I'm not speaking for her at all, but I do feel like in general, the animal that we love the most maybe has qualities that we admire or things about them that we are very drawn to. So to close, because this video is going to be incredibly long because I had so much to say about foxes because they're so great. I love foxes. They're my absolute favorite animal. They are so cool, I can't even handle it. I love the crazy screamy sounds they make. I love the way they look. I love their lore. I love the way they're depicted in media. I love all of it. I just love foxes. Throwing to you, what's your favorite animal? Do you agree with my assessment that overall we tend to be drawn toward the social norms and the social personality that we attribute to that animal? Or am I totally off base and you just love your animal because it looks real cute? Either way, no judgment. To animal lovers, furries, crazy cat ladies, and all the in-betweens, welcome to the fandom.